Sian, I am thrilled that you are here for this conversation. I admire you. I look to how you show up with such coherence in social media and on our calls and in our conversations and in your emails and on Zoom. And I really appreciate that. I really appreciate who you are in the world and who and how you are with me. And so I'm really happy to have this conversation with you.
Thank you so much, Megan, for inviting me. Really appreciating you and all of the work you bring to the world also. It feels great to be having this conversation with you today. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Anything that you want to say to introduce yourself?
So those who haven't met me before, I'm Sian Johnson. I'm a tantric pleasure coach, pleasure catalyst, and sex therapist. And I work mostly with individual men, and I work with men and their partners. So I work with men primarily as part of the couple's relationship.
And then primarily with men, and then do you also work with couples?
Yes, yes, I work with couples. Yeah.
Well, so tell us, what drew you to the field of sexuality and sex coaching? And how has your approach evolved over time?
Mm, Great question. Um, the short answer is that I was having a midlife crisis, I guess. A burnout in yet another failed career. And or the career itself wasn't failed, but I felt incredibly dissatisfied in it, and I knew there was something better out there for me. And a friend asked me if you could do anything without worrying about what training and how much you'd earn, um, what would it be? And this answer just bubbled out of nowhere, some kind of sex therapist. But I had no idea about any of that, and I didn't want to go back to university. So my friend suggested, well, why don't you start with Tantra? So I started attending Tantra workshops and Tantra training. And from there, it became really clear that my passion is serving people and supporting people in the areas of sex and sexuality. And so from very early on in the journey, I became really clear that that was where I wanted to go. And so from there, I took training in consent and psychotherapy and counseling and coaching and more tantra training and kink training and sexuality training and yeah. And how have I evolved over time? First, I began with tantric massage, offering tantric massage, and then did my sexological bodywork training, which trained me to work therapeutically with bodies, supporting sexual dissatisfaction and inviting people into more pleasure. And it's grown and grown from there. And now I run programs for individual men and programs for couples, as well as one-to-one therapy sessions, online
Hmm.
and in person. Yeah.
And pleasure is such a great word. Tell me about pleasure in your life.
Pleasure in my life. Ah, it it's such an expansive word. So
Mm.
it can be anywhere from feeling the breeze on my skin when I'm out for a walk. It can be watching a sunrise. It can be movement to music. I don't call it dance because I don't consider myself a dancer, but I move to music. Spending time with friends, which I don't get to do very often, but when I do, I make the absolute most of it. Sex and intimacy, so solo sex is just like out of this world since I discovered Tantra. Partner sex, I describe it more actually as partner intimacy rather than sex because it's not just about penis and vagina as is, the phrase penis and vagina or penis and anus. That tends to be the goal for so many people, but actually intimate touch and connection is infinitely more pleasurable for me now than it ever has been. Yeah. So,
Mm.
good food, love good
Mm.
food in a good restaurant. Yeah, very nice. So yeah,
Mm.
pleasure comes in many forms, including touch and intimacy.
Mhm. Yes, it's a whole world that becomes available.
Hmm.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah. And how do you guide individuals or couples in understanding and reclaiming their desire?
Most of us walk around with myths of what it means to be a man or a woman, or people discovering what they how they experience the world through their non-binary or trans experience. But most of us have a lot of myths around sex, sexuality, um, what the feminine does, what the masculine does. And I invite people into exploring their own version of their own sexuality. So instead of following the myths, oh, this happens, then this happens, then this happens, and then that's supposed to happen. And then if this doesn't happen or it doesn't work the way it should, that's like terrible. And shame starts to happen. So instead, I invite people to go on a journey of discovering their own unique, innate sexuality. It's not what you see on porn, or it might be, you might be destined to become a porn star, but for most of us, sex and intimacy and connection doesn't happen like it does in porn or in movies or through erotic fiction. Those are myths that are, we pay money to view, we pay money to see, we pay money to read. So I help people to deconstruct the myths that they're carrying, whilst at the same time exploring their pleasure, their own unique pleasure, and seeing what blocks there are there, and seeing whether we can move through them. So
Mm,
that's the basis of my work, essentially, is how can we remove the blocks and how can you move into greater pleasure? It's very simple on paper.
yes, on paper, that's really great. No, porn is like fast food. It's like McDonald's. Uh, I grew up, my mother, we loved McDonald's fries and McDonald's Coke because there's something different about the fries and the Coke in the US. There's just something really special about it. And every once in a while, that's good, but not good for me. Not good for my system, not good for me.
Mm.
And making porn, it was so sterile that it healed a bunch of stuff because it was healed lots of trauma from the past because here were these like sexual acts that were happening, and it was the lights and the releases and the cameras and the crew and right and all of these things, and it healed something profound for me, but it had absolutely nothing to do with sex and intimacy.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's what we see on our screens, the sterile environment. Even in amateur porn, as they call it, it's
Hmm.
still performing. And true sex and intimacy and connection is less about performing and more about being present, present with your own needs, present with the body and the heart and the soul of the person that you're with. Even if it's a one night stand, even if it's a casual connection, it can
Yes.
still be deep and meaningful and healing.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, getting ready for today, I think I have watched every video that Sean has out on the internet. And so I made a list of questions that we have, and we will probably not get to all the questions because the conversation seems to flow between the two of us. So when I'm looking down, that's where I'm looking. I'm looking to these questions, and I let's talk about touch. From sex and intimacy into touch. What practices and habits do you recommend for your clients in integrating meaningful healing touch and intimacy?
Mm. I think the most important thing in relationships, especially in long-term relationships, is, and certainly in westernized culture, touch is very much conflated with sex. And I just want to take sex off the table just for a second and talk about connection. So, when we're children, we grow up with the bonds of touch. Hopefully, if we grew up in these kind of families, we grew up with the bonds of touch as being safe and nurturing. And that's very important in infanthood. Then, as we hit toddlers, we kind of push our parents away, moving towards independence, but we still need our parents there. And then as we grow, we become teenagers. The push is further away from our parents and more outward towards other people, and driven by puberty and hormones. Most of us reach out for connection for through partners, having your first partner, having your first girlfriend or boyfriend. And it's at that point that we tend to pull away from our parents, or our parents will pull away from us. And this is a natural process. But what can happen is that we also get messages of be careful, don't get pregnant, don't get an STI, don't be promiscuous, or abstinence, or whatever it is our families believe around that. So that touch then becomes associated with sex. And as we move through our teenage years, because we're driven by hormones, all touch tends to spark a sexual response. And our main purpose for touch is to satisfy a sexual response. So touch and sex then become conflated. They are the same, one and the same. As we grow as human beings, it's important that we learn to separate touch from sex, because touch is just in itself is incredibly nurturing. And what I see in men and I see in couples is this misunderstanding that touch will always lead to sex, or even the expectation that touch will always lead to sex. If I touch you in a certain way, that means I want sex with you, or I'm aroused by you. So one of the first things I do with couples is I talk about how can you separate the two out? How can you be in connection with each other through loving touch without worrying about whether it's going to lead to sex? Or I can't give her a hug now because we've got to take the kids to football right now, and I don't want to get horny because I know the horny won't lead to sex. And or I can't let him cuddle me in bed because it's my time of the month, and if he cuddles me right now then he's going to want sex, and I've got back cramps and stomach cramps and it's just not happening. So how can we normalize platonic loving touch in a relationship that doesn't always have to lead to sex? And then there's a bunch of other things that I do as well, but that's where I start.
Now, I hear too your work with the consent wheel in the connection between touch and intimacy and being able to disconnect that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The wheel of consent is an incredible tool for noticing the impact of touch, noticing what I want in any given moment, so that you can notice what you want in any given moment. And then notice that by the noticing, I can trust it and value it before communicating it, before any action happens. So, for example, my partner might be washing up at the sink and I have an impulse to stroke his shoulders and to give him a hug from behind. So, what I might want to do is check in, um, is first to notice that impulse. Then I might check in and just go, am I doing this for me or am I doing this for him? Am I doing it because really I should be saying sorry for something I did earlier in the day? And this is my way of apologizing through touch rather than actually apologizing through words, which is what's needed. Yeah. So am I trying to get around speaking the shameful thing that I did something wrong and I need to apologize? Or am I doing this because this is a body impulse? Can I trust that this is actually what my body wants right now? And then can I value it? Can I value that my wanting to touch him is in this way is important? And then can I communicate that? I might say to him, darling, can I give you a hug? I'd love to give you a hug from behind while you're doing the dishes. And he's free to say yes or no, but he might say no. He might say, no, I'm still angry about what happened earlier. And I'll go, okay, thank you. Then I need to apologize for what happened earlier. And then we have a communication. Then we might hug. But that impulse is checking what that impulse is about. Is it me trying to seduce him and not have to apologize? Or is it a genuine, yeah, I love you so much and I just want to give you a hug,
Mm.
or I need something. So the wheel is it's a way of starting to understand where our impulses are coming from, what we want, and how we can express our needs and our desires in a way that defies shame or
Mm.
moves through shame or past shame. Yeah, it's
Mm.
probably a better way of putting it.
Shame is something that comes up a lot.
Yes.
Right in the beginning. How do you work with, deal with, untangle shame?
Oh, well, I really like Brene Brown's analogy for shame.
Mm.
Um, she talks about healthy shame and toxic shame. And basically, shame is the background to shame is, and I believe it's the strongest and most um, strongest. And I've got a number of words, but I can't pick the one. They're all fighting to come through, and none of them are right. But I think it feels like the most dangerous emotion for us to experience, and that's because it's associated with survival. We develop shame as a survival response. So if we learn that something that we do or someone who we are is not accepted in our household or in our family or in our community, then we develop a sense of shame in order for us to hide that part of us, to not do the things that we want to do. And because if we were to continue to do the things that we want to do, or if we continue to be the person who we believe we are, then it risks abandonment. And way back when we lived in tiny communities, if we were abandoned, it would certainly mean death because you couldn't survive on your own. So we have this arguably overactive survival response, which is to step into shame. So that's why it's there. So Brené Brown talks about healthy shame, which is I have a set of values that I have chosen for myself. I believe in climate change and I believe in recycling. So if I put a glass bottle in the main bin instead of in the recycling bin, I might have a prickle of conscience. And that's healthy shame because that stops me going against the values that I've adopted. And I know not everybody believes in climate change, but that's just one example. So my prickle of conscience tells me that I'm about to cross my own boundaries of my own values, and that's healthy. We all need healthy shame. That's the thing that stops us killing our partners when they've annoyed us and all of the other things. So that's healthy shame. um, Toxic shame is when we have a set of values or desires that we have ingested, that we've taken on from society or family or the workplace or religion, that actually don't feel right for us. They don't sit with our own values. So, for example, if I grew up in the church and they talk about gay marriage as being a sin, that actually doesn't sit with my value of all people deserve a right to live and prosper. So I I would that toxic belief within me, and often we're not aware of it, generates toxic shame. And so I have to learn to discern between what for me is healthy shame. Oh, that's good. It's keeping me in line with my values. And what's toxic, as in, actually, that's somebody else's values that don't match with mine. And learning to differentiate between the two is quite a simple process. And by moving through the toxic shame and honoring the healthy shame is one of the ways that we can allow ourselves to access more pleasure in our lives. And that can be anything from a sunset to a funny movie to intimacy.
Hmm. The path from shame to a sunset. Yeah. Shame is definitely I think, the most detrimental energies and emotions. And on the power versus force scale, it is the lowest. And and so many of us spend so much time there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Hmm.
It's very, very painful for so many people. So many
Mhm.
people. Yeah.
Really without a way out. And what you're saying is that you have a process.
Yeah. I mean, it starts with understanding what's going on first. And that's us. It's rather than, so it's a mixture of um, psychological approaches, but primarily it's body based. Noticing when shame hits and noticing how that feels in the body, because the body reacts far quicker than the mind does. The body will tell you what's going on if you pay attention to it. So I invite clients into a process of becoming more somatically focused. So that means more aware of the body and following what the body is telling you. And healthy shame and toxic shame feels different in the body. And it's
Mhm.
possible to tell what's what. And once you're aware of what toxic shame is about, you can get curious. I call it observation, curiosity, and generosity. So observation is the noticing. Getting curious is I'm wondering why I'm feeling some shame now. What is that about? What is that relating to? Oh, that relates me to when my grandmother told me I was a dirty boy because I had my hands in my pants, or some other, sometimes it's one thing that generates a whole branch of shame, but often it's being in an environment where we weren't able to be who we truly were, who can. We just don't grow up in those kind of families. Um, so yeah, lots of different branches of shame, but noticing shame in the body, then stepping into generosity, which is non-judgment. So don't judge yourself for feeling shame. It's a set of circumstances, but being aware of it means that you can move through it. You don't have to be a victim to the shame. You can choose to move through it.
Mhm.
It's fantastic. Seeing
Pathway
people
out of
do this.
shame. I think there's a period after that. Um, let's see. Rekindling connection. So this is a perfect, these are great segues. For couples who've grown distant, what are some foundational steps to rebuild closeness and passion?
First of all, not all couples are suited to stay together forever. I have this, I, I've kind of been with this in various forms for a lot of my adult life. And it's true of friendships, relationships, workplaces, siblings, families, even, and also partners. I have a belief that we find the people we're meant to spend time with and grow with, and we help them to grow, and they help us to grow. And so all relationships have the potential to support us to grow. And sometimes we grow out of friendships, relationships, partners, and even sometimes family. I think once we've done enough growth with that person, sometimes a relationship naturally comes to a close. For couples that choose to want to stay together, um, rekindling connection is entirely depends what's broken the connection in the first place. You know, we are both in the field of sexology and somatic inquiry, and so I'm going to focus on that element. I think quite often for couples that drift apart, a lot of the problems are due to time, both busy lives, especially if there's children, especially if both parents are working. There may be other caring commitments beyond that, older family members and so on. Sometimes that's time. And sometimes it's the kind of, there's a phrase, 1,000 paper cuts, small hurts that become really big. They're not big enough to pick up on the time at the time. Like she never empties the dishwater from the sink, or she puts the dishes in the dishwasher in a really weird way, or he never empties the dishwasher. It's not those things. That's what you would call a paper cut. It's a minor annoyance, but it builds up over time. And so for a lot of couples, 1,000 paper cuts will become a big issue at some point. Not big enough to fight about, but something to separate over, because there's just like, it just kills the passion. So in terms of rekindling, I I I'm discovering the imago technique, which is a way of communicating with each other where you talk about appreciations, you hear each other, you empathize with each other, you reflect each other's feelings. And so that's the appreciations. And then you can ask for a behavior change. And I like to alternate between the two. So we do an appreciation, then we take it turns to request a behavior change. And it's in the present moment, not you always do this or you never do that. It's like when you come home from work, no, sorry, I'll start that again. It starts with I feel you're not present with me and the children when you come home from work. I would like you to be more present and feel more connected with us as a family. Is there a way you could leave your work problems at the door? So that's, I feel, what the issue is, my request, and is there a possible solution for this? So, there's this whole process backwards and forwards. So what you're doing is you're bypassing the conflict, you're bypassing the blame and shame, you're bypassing, the hope is that you're bypassing. So if I'm hearing that from somebody, I'm like, okay, I hear your feelings, I hear your need, and I hear your request. And I can step into willingness with that. I can find a solution when I'm not defensive and angry. So communication is really important. Then the touch, the platonic touch is really important. Valuing each other. The if I'm expected to perform when I go to bed, I am not going to want to go to bed. I'm going to want you to go to bed and get some sleep so that you're asleep by the time I get into bed. Who likes being expected or told what to do? Whereas if I'm invited, that's a whole different ballgame. So communication, touch, yeah, there's a bunch of techniques that I also cover. I also talk about oral sex and sex toys and penetration practice and how to last longer in bed and what to do with an erection and what not to do when your erection's not there and all of that other stuff too. But it all starts with the connection. It all starts with being kind to myself and kind to you.
What do you think happens with passion over the years?
With passion, you
Mm.
broke up for a second then. What
Oh,
happens with
sorry, with
passion?
passion over the years. So there's some theory that passion is just going to subside. It will be very close friends who live together, work together, are alongside one another, who also sometimes make not exciting love. And I disagree, but I would love to hear how you feel
Yeah,
about
it doesn't
something
have,
over the years.
yeah, it doesn't have to be like that.
Mm,
It can be like that. And for some couples, it does work and they're perfectly happy. And that's okay. Who am I to judge? But for people who want to keep the passion alive, I think it's massively planning sex is massively underrated. People rely on spontaneous desire. The reality is that, and it is gendered, unfortunately, but male-bodied people tend to experience more spontaneous desire than female-bodied people. It's just, I mean, how people ever have sex when you look at the stats, I've no idea, because 75, on average, 75% of men experience spontaneous desire. That's like, oh, I'm feeling horny. She's there. I'm attracted to her, or I've just caught sight of the sunlight in her hair and oh, her nice ass, and I'm in there. Whereas 75% of female-bodied people tend to experience what's called responsive desire. So they tend to respond to the environment, to the invitation, to feeling safe, to feeling appreciated and feeling loved. That's not to say that men don't appreciate those things too. And it's not to say that women can't experience spontaneous desire and be visually stimulated by something. That's not what I'm saying here. It's not that cut and dried. But generally speaking, if you've got one male-bodied person or one predominantly male-orientated person in the relationship and one predominantly female-orientated person in the relationship, then it's going to be, you know, spontaneous desire versus responsive desire. Once you understand that, then you realize just how unlikely spontaneous sex is going to be. It's all we ever see anywhere.
right.
We don't see couples making a date. We don't see couples going, Tuesday, we're going to start off with some self massage, then we're going to move into some platonic touch, and then we'll see where it goes from there.
Yes.
It's massively underrated planning sex.
Oh,
And
yes.
lots of people think they should be having sex 3 times a week. If you're
Right.
having sex 3 times a week and you're both really enjoying that, that's fantastic. And it's better to have one sex once a month that's connected and close and meaningful and alive and mutually satisfying than it is to have 20 times of sex during the month and people be pissed off or bored or whatever.
Right. Waiting for it to be over. Because we can start on Monday if the brain bathed in estrogen begins 24 hours before. We can start on Monday and start acknowledging the brain bathed in estrogen. Start maybe doing some things, maybe send some sexy texts, and we just kind of prime and start warming things up on Monday for Tuesday, and then maybe Tuesday even leads into Wednesday, and maybe it is that 12-hour kind of thing that it was way back in the beginning, and that it all starts. It's and planning. We're planning it.
Yes, yeah.
Yes.
I mean, foreplay for me starts at breakfast, or foreplay starts with the invitation. How would it be for us to spend some time together on Friday night?
Mm.
Ooh, what have you got planned? Hmm, I thought maybe we could do this and maybe that and maybe the other. How do you fancy that? And then the lead up to the Friday night, yeah, foreplay starts at breakfast or perhaps on the Monday, as you said, for a Friday date. I say
Yes.
date. Date doesn't necessarily mean leaving the house, although it might be.
Right.
Um, yeah, but setting
Mm.
that time up, the anticipation. I have a friend who describes themselves as having an anticipation a kink because they're all about the anticipation. They love the anticipation, the drawn out weightedness, the tease almost of the anticipation. I mean, that's not for everyone. I hate anticipation, but if I knew I was, gonna have some sexy time with my partner, I may well be starting to think about what I'm going to wear and what shower gel I might use beforehand and
Yes.
what candles to light and
Mm.
what music to play or yeah, or how I'm going to beat him with a whip. I don't know, which whatever play happens in the bedroom. Yeah.
Yes. Planning the food, planning, yes, planning. Let's see. Oh, there's so many good questions. And just let's say, when you're working with men, what are the most common issues that they come to you with? And what do you see happen in coaching?
Yeah, I would say the draw for the men that come to see me is primarily um, delayed ejaculation, premature ejaculation, difficulty with erratic erections, and lack of sexual confidence. So they come for teaching around that, and late virginity or inexperienced sexuality. So, and I work primarily with midlife men, which is amazing. I love midlife men. Um, and it can be any of those kind of things that present themselves. In my experience, because of the way that I work, I'm training to be a psychotherapist. I'm nearly qualified now. Um, I've always had this, even since I began, before I kind of really delved into this, I always thought there's something more at play here. It's not just about how hard I can get, or I don't get morning wood anymore, or um, I don't last as long as I want to. There's something more going on. So, first of all, I rule out any health issues. That's important to acknowledge. You can get into a coaching session, and by session 4, they finally say, "Oh, yeah, I've got diabetes." And you go, oh, if I'd have known that at the beginning, my approach would have been different. So, I
Mhm.
rule out health issues. And then I use a combination of psychotherapy and the tantra stuff and the Taoist stuff and the body-based somatic bodywork stuff, because if you work on just one of those, you kind of miss the obvious thing that's like, oh, there was an incident that happened 6 years ago, and actually that's when the problem started, and it's to do with what's going on psychologically. Like you can't deal with premature ejaculation without talking about shame. You just can't, because unless you deal with the shame or the guilt or the transgression or the kink, the unspoken kink or the unspoken desires or fantasies, unless you talk about those, you'll never be able to really truly address what's going on. So that's my approach.
Mm. And what are the things that you see? What kind of transformations do you see over working with someone? And you work with them long term, over 18 months?
Six to 12 months, yeah.
Mm.
6 to 9 months is about the average, but 6 to 12 months. I do have clients that need more time than that, and that's because we need to just gently go, maybe not appointments every fortnight, maybe there needs to be bigger gaps or more support calls in between.
Mhm.
Um, so it does vary very much on the client and the depth of their experience. And what I find is that working with midlife men is that the adaptability is different, because once you get into midlife, because you're changing the way the brain works, you're changing neural pathways in the brain's neuroscience. Um, the 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 you tend to be more set in your ways, basically, in midlife. So for some men, it can be a real challenge to develop the flexibility to change the way that they look at life and the myths that they believe and the shame that they're carrying. It can be quite a challenge for some people to do that. Yeah, so I do work long term. And I've forgotten your original question. Sorry.
What are some of the transformations that you've seen?
Oh, God.
Hmm.
I've seen men who work themselves into the ground, highly successful men, working themselves into an early grave. because they're driven for lots of reasons, but one of the things is they're driven by an inadequacy and shame in some area of their lives. And if that happens to be in sex and sexuality, when you begin to heal that part of the self, then the drive to keep going in your 60s, building businesses, selling businesses, buying more businesses, that drive ebbs away, and they start to enjoy life, and they start to think about retirement, and they start, you know, easing away, taking the foot off the gas, and actually beginning to enjoy pleasure, not just in their intimate relationships, but much more. And they become really lovely people to be around instead of these driven go-getters. And there's nothing wrong with being driven and a go-getter, but when you're doing it in your 60s and you're getting tired and your health is suffering and your relationships are suffering and you're just exhausted or you're fed up or whatever, sex can be the key to unlock be feeling safe enough in the body to make choices that feel good for you. So that's just kind of one example. um Sexual experiences can be really transformational to work with. Sexual inexperience is usually there for a psychological reason, or sometimes people choose to focus on their career and they put intimacy to one side, and then they kind of wake up in their 50s and go, oh wow, okay, I've potentially missed the boat, there's more to life and I haven't had that. So sometimes people will come to explore sexuality for the first time, or for the first time in a healthy way. So yeah, beautiful, really beautiful work.
Mm. Nice. Very nice.
Mm.
Well,
I had a guy, I had a guy the other day who we'd gotten to stage 3 of the sexual empowerment program, which is where we begin to, and he's on the platinum program, so he works with me intimately, body to body, after we've gone through several stages. And he was like, we were playing the May I Will You game, and he was like, for 3 minutes, he had access to my body and could touch me in any way that he wanted to for him. And he was like, after that, he went, oh my God, I have a choice.
mm,
I have a choice to touch you for my pleasure. I don't have to constantly please you. I'm not trying to make you come. I'm not trying to do this, that, or the other. I'm just touching you because I want to. And it
mm,
just felt, this man is in his late 60s. It just,
wow.
you know, it's really beautiful to see. You can see it in their body, how alive people become when they do this work. It's amazing.
Mm.
You know
Well,
this, right? You know
yes.
this too.
It
Yeah.
is a beautiful thing. It's unpredictable, and where something starts, there for me, there's not a syllabus of here we go here and then here and then here. It's we may just like our conversation started. We started away, and then it took some beautiful, wonderful turns, and the transformation is always what the original intention was, but then so much more.
Yes. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Sex is the key. More and more, I need to write an article about this. Oh, seriously. Sex is the key that unlocks not just sex and desire and pleasure and intimacy. Yes, it's that. Yes. Yes, it's about being in more choice. Yes, it's about lasting longer or having firmer erections or whatever. Yes, yes, yes. We all know that. Tick. But it's about what happens to you as an individual. It's what happens to these men and these couples as they literally light up and become like better versions of themselves, the kind of versions that are no longer sort of like walking around like this, they're kind of walking around like this,
Yes.
with the heart open and closed, obviously, when it needs to be, but so much more, in tune and in touch with people around them. And it's really beautiful, really. I mean, I use the word beautiful. A lot of men wouldn't use that word, but for me as a practitioner, yeah, sex is the key to unlocking the whole gamut, I suppose, of, yeah,
Yes, of everything, creativity, confidence, intuition, everything.
connection. Yeah,
Mm.
pleasure. Yeah,
Mm. Well, tell us about you and your programs, and then I know you have to go.
thank you. Um, so as I kind of alluded to already, I run one-to-one sex therapy, online or in person, and that's, as you might imagine, you go for therapy, you have a couple of sessions, you have a review, maybe you want to have some more sessions, maybe you don't. So that's one-to-one sex therapy, and it can go on as long or as short as you need it to be. Um, then I have the sexual empowerment programs and the sexual and personal mastery programs, which are I've got a huge resources online. I built a whole program last year. I spent most of last year building this program with all the tools and techniques that I'm aware of, that I know that I use in my coaching sessions. And that's available to buy online. Either, do it yourself. You can just, it's a self-learning opportunity, or you can get online coaching with that, or as the Platinum program suggests, you can work directly with me body to body. So those are the kind of two main avenues of my work. I also run Wheel of Consent trainings, which also transformational. And I have a tantric massage book, and all of these services are available on sianjohnson.com, SIAN Johnson.com.
We have so much more to talk about
Thank you.
another time. Thank you.
Yeah, I would love to come back. Thank you so much, Megan, for having me and inviting me to your podcast. I've enjoyed speaking with you. And next time I'd like to hear more of you also.
Yes,
Yeah, yeah.
okay. Until then,
Take care. Thank you, Megan.
thank you. Bye.